What if I told you that a man who spent his entire life pushing a mop died with over $8 million in the bank? No inheritance, no lucky break, no secret business, just a quiet janitor who showed up every single day while everyone around him assumed he had nothing. His co-workers never suspected a thing. His neighbors had no idea for decades. He kept one powerful habit completely hidden from the world. And when he died, the truth left everyone speechless. How does an ordinary janitor quietly build a fortune nobody knew existed? The answer is the most important money lesson you will ever hear. Part 1. The janitor nobody noticed. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, a quiet man named Ronald Reed arrived at work before anyone else. He pushed his cleaning cart through empty hallways, emptied trash cans, wiped dusty desks and scrubbed floors that nobody else wanted to touch. Employees walked past him every single day. Most never learned his name. To everyone in that building, Ronald was simply the janitor, invisible, unimportant, and easy to forget. But Ronald Reed was hiding something extraordinary. His clothes came from thrift stores. He drove a beat-up second-hand car that most people would have been embarrassed to park outside. He never ate at expensive restaurants. He never wore a watch that cost more than a few dollars. On the outside, Ronald looked exactly like what everyone assumed he was, a poor working man with nothing to show for decades of hard labor. And that assumption would eventually shock an entire nation. Because while everyone around him spent money the moment it arrived, Ronald did something different every single payday. Before paying for anything else, before groceries, before bills, before anything, he followed one rule, the same rule, every single month, without exception, for over 60 years straight. His co-workers thought it was pointless. His friends thought it was strange. Nobody understood why a janitor with almost nothing would bother with such discipline. Years passed. Ronald kept showing up. He kept cleaning. He kept living simply. Nothing about his daily life suggested anything unusual was happening beneath the surface. But hidden completely out of sight, something was quietly building, growing bigger with every passing month, every passing year, every single paycheck. Then one morning, Ronald Reed didn't show up for work. He had passed away at 92 years old, and when lawyers began looking through his accounts, what they found left his entire community completely speechless, because the man everyone had ignored, overlooked, and forgotten had been sitting on a secret the entire time. Part 2. The rule he never broke. When lawyers first opened Ronald's accounts, they expected almost nothing. After all, this was a man who had spent his entire life earning a janitor's wage. But the numbers kept growing. Thousands became tens of thousands. Tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands. Then the number crossed 1 million, then 2, then 3. By the time they finished counting, Ronald Reed, the quiet janitor nobody had ever noticed, had left behind a fortune worth over $8 million. The room went silent. Nobody could explain it. There was no inheritance waiting in the background, no secret business running quietly on the side, no lottery ticket tucked inside a drawer. The answer to how Ronald built $8 million on a janitor's salary was something so simple that most people hearing it for the first time refused to believe it. Decades earlier, when Ronald received his very first paycheck, he made himself one promise. Before spending a single dollar on anything else, he would save and invest a small portion of every paycheck. No excuses. No exceptions, no matter what. In the beginning, the amounts were almost laughably small. While co-workers bought new televisions and upgraded their cars, Ronald was investing amounts so tiny that most financial advisors would have told him it wasn't worth the effort. But Ronald ignored the noise. He ignored the opinions. He ignored the lifestyle everyone around him was chasing. He simply kept following his one rule, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. What Ronald understood that almost nobody else did was this: he wasn't trying to get rich quickly. He was letting time do the work for him. Every dollar he invested started earning returns. Then those returns started earning returns of their own. Slowly and quietly, without anyone noticing, his money began multiplying completely on its own, while he continued pushing his cleaning cart every single morning. The truly shocking part was how invisible it all looked from the outside. No signs, no signals, no hints that anything unusual was happening. Just a quiet janitor living simply and following the same rule he had always followed. And the decision he made next would take everything he had already built and multiply it beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Part 3. the moment everyone got wrong. As the years passed, Ronald's investments kept growing silently in the background. What had started as painfully small amounts from each paycheck had now become something significant. But if you had followed Ronald around on any ordinary Tuesday, you would have seen absolutely nothing remarkable. Same old car, same thrift store clothes, same cleaning cart, same quiet smile. From the outside, Ronald Reed still looked exactly like the poorest man in the building, and that is when people started making their biggest mistake. Coworkers whispered that Ronald had wasted his life. Some genuinely felt sorry for him, a man who had worked for decades and still couldn't afford anything nice. Others joked quietly that after all these years, he still looked like he had nothing. They believed wealth was something you could see and touch. Expensive cars, large houses, designer clothes. Ronald heard every comment, every joke, every whispered conversation, and he simply kept pushing his cart. Because Ronald understood something that almost nobody around him had figured out yet. Every single dollar he chose not to spend was silently purchasing him something far more valuable than any luxury item could ever offer. It was purchasing freedom. Real, permanent, unshakable freedom. While his co-workers were drowning in car payments, credit card bills and monthly expenses that never seemed to end, Ronald's investments were growing larger every single year without making a single sound. Then came the moment that truly separated Ronald Reed from everyone else. The stock market crashed, prices collapsed, fear spread everywhere. News headlines screamed disaster. Experienced investors panicked and sold everything they owned just to stop the bleeding. Average people swore they would never touch the stock market again. For the first time in years, a significant portion of Ronald's fortune disappeared. On paper. Most people in his position would have walked away and never looked back. Instead, Ronald did something that would have seemed completely insane to anyone watching. He bought more, quietly, calmly, without hesitation. And that single decision, made while everyone else was running in the opposite direction, would become the most profitable move of his entire life. Part 4. The Secret Millionaire. The stock market recovered. It always does, and the shares Ronald had quietly purchased during the crash, when everyone else was selling in panic, began rising again. Then they kept rising. Then they rose even further. The fortune that had temporarily shrunk on paper came back stronger than before, and with every passing year, Ronald's patience proved itself right again and again and again. Not because he was lucky, not because he had access to opportunities nobody else had, but because he understood one truth that most people spend their entire lives running away from. Wealth is not built in moments. It is built in decades. Ronald never told anyone. He never showed off. He never dropped hints. He simply kept showing up to work, kept living within his means, and kept letting time do what time does best. While people all around him spent their lives performing wealth, buying things they couldn't afford to impress people who weren't paying attention, Ronald was actually building it. Silently, invisibly, one paycheck at a time. Then came the day everything became public. When lawyers finished counting Ronald's accounts, investments, and holdings, the final number stopped everyone cold. $8 million. Built entirely on a janitor's salary. Built entirely through patience, discipline, and one unbreakable rule followed for over 60 years. The co-workers, who had never learned his name, suddenly wished they had sat down and listened. The friends who had quietly pitied his simple lifestyle finally understood what he had been doing all along. But Ronald's greatest gift was never the $8 million. His greatest gift was the proof. Proof that you do not need a six-figure salary, a prestigious degree, or a perfect opportunity to build real wealth. You need one simple habit, practiced consistently over a long period of time. The janitor nobody noticed spent his entire life quietly demonstrating the most powerful financial lesson in the world. And now, finally, the whole world was paying attention.
Hey, if this video gave you something to think about, that's exactly why I make these every single day. Most of this stuff nobody ever teaches you, and I just think that needs to change. So if you got value today, hit subscribe.